Okay, Governor Brown had part of his climate change bill defeated. The phasing out of the use of petroleum was defeated, and in typical leftist fashion, Governor Brown said that this is something that was basically just bullying by the oil companies. It's always the evil oil companies. Leftists always blame the oil companies. He says his zeal has been intensified to a maximum degree, and nothing is going to stop this state from pushing forward on our low carbon fuel standard and our cap and trade and our electric vehicle mandate and all the rest. The problem with this idea, this opinion, is that the oil companies wouldn't even exist if it weren't a product that was demanded by us. These oil companies are supplying what we want. If you want to argue against oil, you need to argue against those of us demanding it instead of the oil companies. If we get away from oil, we need a viable alternative. I'm amazed that I've seen ads within the past year from oil companies that aren't even using the usual strategy of convincing consumers that one product is better than the competitors. They are basically aiming to educate people that it takes energy to get food from the farm to the grocery store, that everything we do depends on energy, that it is illogical to portray the companies that supply the energy we need as evil, yet that is exactly what the left does. Jerry Brown had the reduction of petroleum gutted from that bill that he wants through, and it's angered him. Governor Brown does not even want to consider the will of the people of California. He wants typical leftist top-down government and not even give the pretense of following the will of the people. Brown says that this defeat has motivated him all the more to fight for things like cap and trade, which is going to drive the cost of our electricity up even more than it already is. I just read something bizarre at the California State website. Governor Brown is talking about an agreement he made with China about climate change. Since when can a governor make an agreement with the head of a nation? That was an aside, back to the main subject. These policies are going to make California electricity even more expensive than it already is. That's going to make California industry even less competitive than it already is. The left, and this man in particular as a leftist, is making the state even less competitive. It is making the state a less desirable place to live. It's why people are moving from California to Texas. The water shortage, the high gasoline costs, the high electric rates are all typical leftist failures. When you see a shortage of a product, I don't care what it is, leftist policies are the cause. We happen to have a shortage of electricity and water in California right now, and that is due to leftist policies. All through history, leftist policies cause shortages. They decide that a company is making too much and put a price cap. Demand is increased, supply is decreased. It's why shortages happen with price caps. Suppose you own a factory and your product sells for $5 a unit. If the government came along and said you could only sell it for $4, there'd be a shortage. Demand would rise. Since it's selling for less than market value at the demand of the government, people would start hoarding it and sell them at $5. People that had nothing to do with the manufacture of that product are now making a profit on it. It increases demand, but it also decreases production. More people will buy them at $4, but fewer people will produce them at such a price. Market signals are being messed with because a price increase signals that more of a product is needed. Play around with this. Draw some supply and demand curves like you hopefully learned in basic economics class. Shortage of electricity is because no new power plants are allowed, demand increases with population and prices rise. This solar panel push is another boondoggle. When people pay their electric bills, they are not just paying for electricity, but for engineers, technicians, and power line workers. Solar panels require maintenance expenses of the homeowner. There are efficient, centralized ways of generating electricity, such as hydroelectric or nuclear. They aren't allowing any new power plants in California despite a desperate need for them. You wouldn't want to start a business with this uncertainty in prices and electrical supply. This drives business out. It's a leftist problem caused by leftists interfering in free markets. They decide markets what a product should be worth, what labor should be worth. They decide that a product that is surviving in the market for a product that is not, such as oil and solar. Thus, it requires a subsidy which causes unemployment in other sectors of the economy. If solar was workable, marketable, and competitive with other forms of energy, it wouldn't require a subsidy. If it did, I'd be all for it. I'm a big free market person, but it shouldn't be forced on us. Also, there'd still be a choice for those that didn't want it in a free market. Leftist policies always lead to lack of choice, shortages, and unemployment. They either put a price cap and shortages occur, or outright don't allow a product to be marketed. Go back to the example of the factory and the government price cap. Prices should be higher, and that is a signal that more supply is needed in the market, which is being hidden by the government price cap. It's a symptom that a market is out of equilibrium, but it can't be corrected if the symptoms are hidden by government policy. It's why there are chronic shortages in any socialist economy. The USSR, Cuba, Venezuela have had or are having such shortages. This is currently true in Venezuela. It was true in the 1970s United Kingdom, which culminated in the winter of discontent in 1979. All shortages caused by socialist policies. California and America as a whole is starting to see signs of this. General Motors, anyone? Solyndra, anyone? Tesla Motors, anyone? Ethanol, anyone? America has dropped from second on the Economic Freedom Index to 18th in the past 15 years. Government involvement in the markets results in shortages. Given what is going on in Venezuela, with empty shelves in the grocery stores, the idea of that should scare Americans as we get more and more government involvement in the economy. The government price caps on food in Venezuela have caused food to be smuggled out of the country by those growing it or those who buy it at the government set prices. They can sell it at market rates in other countries. If the Venezuelan government succeeds in stamping out this black market, it will not improve the situation in Venezuela. It will not lead to more food being available to Venezuelans. It will lead to Venezuelan farmers going out of business. If those in the Venezuelan government want Venezuelan farmers to sell food to Venezuelans, they must allow market forces to set prices. If this continues in the USA, we will face shortages. Wealth isn't just having $1 million in the bank. Wealth is also having affordable, competitive products and jobs in a thriving economy. It allows us to meet our needs and save money. Driving the cost of products up because of leftist policies, high taxes sap all of our money from us. Leftist economic policies cause everything to grind to a halt. I've talked about this in other videos, like the one I called Maggie Thatcher Saved the UK. It doesn't matter if it is under Soviet dictatorship like the USSR, or a democratic monarchy like the UK, or a republic like the USA. Regardless of form of government, leftist policies will cause shortages, regardless of what type of government puts those leftist policies in place. A democratic government, such as has existed in the UK and USA, does not make a better watchdog that avoids the socialistic shortages. Socialistic and leftist policies undermine democracy. Governor Brown said his zeal is intensified because of this defeat of a part of law, but this is really a defeat for Californians because of cap and trade, etc., that will hurt Californians with higher energy costs that take more money yet out of their budget. It will lead to higher energy costs, and more money will be pulled out of the pockets of families. The government will turn around and say they will subsidize those who can't afford the higher electric rates. I've heard this said by California politicians. They don't care about helping people. They care about the control this gives them. I heard an assemblyman from the Los Angeles area talk about how the state government runs the economy here. They really do think in these terms. If they let markets meet demand, people could afford it without a subsidy and taxing others to provide that subsidy. If the government would allow more electrical generation, electricity would be affordable in California as it had been in the past in this state. They even admit that these carbon taxes will make electricity more expensive yet. It's why people and businesses are leaving California, yet they still talk of raising fees, taxes, electric rates, and vehicle license fees. Governor Brown has even asked about where money is going to come from to repair the roads. There is even talk about raising the gas tax. Here's a better idea. Stop pouring the gasoline tax into the general fund and actually use it to repair the roads. Don't tax us more when you don't even use the money you already taxed for what it is intended. We also need to get rid of public employee unions. It's the only hope we have of keeping our property tax at a reasonable rate. I guarantee that this push to do away with Proposition 13 has a public employee unions behind it. They need to quit micromanaging and stay out of the economy. It's not the government's job to manage the economy. They need to let the market do its job. That is what a private sector, private enterprise, free market is all about. But you lose a free market as soon as government gets involved and starts setting prices. It distorts markets. It causes shortages and unemployment. And Governor Brown now has an approval rate, according to an LA Times poll, which has dropped from 64% to 53% between February and now. That is remarkable in a state as left-leaning as California. It means that people in Los Angeles and even San Francisco, the Democratic stronghold, center of the California political machine, and Governor Brown's hometown are not supporting him as strongly. I'm not naive. I realize how left-leaning this state is. Still, it'd be nice if people were waking up. I'm a native Californian and want this state to thrive again. We can, but only if we start to see through the leftist lies.